What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Jeff. I'm part of the XOXO to PlayStation view segment. This is part of our YouTube channel over through, it's like a sub-channel, in case you guys don't know, that's affiliated with the overall podcast and channel of Drink, Respawn, Repeat. So first off, thank you guys for being here, and for listening, for popping in, for spending your next, whatever, half hour or so with me. First off, big shout out to my buddy Casey over at Cosmic Game Club. If you don't know about that place, pretty much what Casey does is he does monthly segments where he talks about games that he's played recently, and he brings on guests to kind of talk about the games. Recently, he's done, as of this recording, Bastion, a few indies such as Inside or not Inside. Limbo, and he's also recently beaten there's one other one Dead Space, and all those I was affiliated with. So not only can you listen to my lovely voice over at his podcast, but you can kind of get a better idea of maybe some more intricate, specific game type stuff. And plus, it's a great time. So please check out his stuff. He also does some episodes where he talks with his brother about multiplayer games, about the Xbox brand, and really it's just a good time. So highly recommend it, and gotta give my props to my brother in arms. Also, gotta give a big shout out to my other brother in arms, my brother from another mother, Javi. Me and myself. We two together run the Drink, Respawn, Repeat podcast. So if for whatever reason you find this episode outside of that podcast and outside of those videos and listening devices and all that, please check it out. Pretty much we cover everything and anything. We talk about Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox. I'm the PlayStation-centric guy. Javi is for sure the Nintendo and Xbox dude. So we try and cover as much as we can, just kind of in general talk about media, gaming, and all of that crap. And on top of that, we also do, as part of making our episodes a little bit more unique, we have a few beers and some adult beverages because we are of age, and we basically review by the end of the episode of each podcast what beer we're drinking and what our thoughts on it are. Granted, it won't always be beer, but it's a good time. So please check it out. That stuff will be going up here soon as well. And really, if you could hit, subscribe to us or however you want to listen and digest our content, I would greatly appreciate it. And hopefully, we can foster a community. And yeah, that was a really long intro for this, and I didn't mean for it to be as long as it is, but I want to make this first episode, and you can probably see in the background right now. Oh, well, you've got Shadow of the Colossus in the background, and the reason why I have that as the crux of this episode is because I don't want to just talk about this remake. I want to talk about just where we are in gaming right now. So if you want to think about the title of the episode, if you're not on YouTube, or if you basically I'm referencing what I'm going to make the title right now, is remakes are coming back in a big way in terms of we've hit a period in time where we're starting to see a lot of games from the mid to late 90s and even the early 2000s be given the opportunity to come back in a lot of strong ways. And it shows up in a lot more ways than I think we even realize. And this really started to begin, I would make almost an argument of back in almost 2010 or 2000, no, maybe not 2010, about 2011, 2012, something like that. That was right around the time when Tomb Raider, the reboot, came out, I think. I'm gonna look up the date real quick just so I can clarify myself here. But that was like one of the first re-emerging titles that kind of came back and restarted stuff in a big way. And it came out in 2013. Okay, so that wasn't too terribly off. But nevertheless, that game kind of kick-started a big new movement in terms of reboots and remakes and remasters and re-envisionings and yada yada yada. Really, it kick-started this new wave of, hey, there's something that's been kind of quiet for a while. Let's reinvestigate that, and it's been kind of consistently going. And granted, it's grown stronger because time has flown by, like it always does. But it's really kind of started to kick up in the last few years. Obviously, with today, I'm recording the same day that Spyro, the Reignited trilogy, got officially announced, coming out in September, which is extremely exciting. It looks good to me. It looks a little cartoony in terms of Spyro's model and whatnot, but overall, I like the direction. It looks gorgeous. It's a big update. It reminds me pretty much beat for beat in a lot of ways the Crash Bandicoot remake, because in a lot of ways it's a complete restructuring with it nods to the history and it nods to where all of this began in terms of, like, it definitely looks at what the older games look like, and it is inspired in terms of how it changes things, but it does definitely change things. It doesn't keep everything the exact same, just looking better. It kind of modernizes it and kind of plays to what the audience they're trying to gun for, which is, for Crash Bandicoot and for Spyro, they're trying to make it a little more cartoony and a little bit more appealing, because honestly that's where the majority of the children's audience and the family market is going to look at. I mean, they're trying to make it so that's super friendly to that market while still also hitting the nostalgia factor for the people like me who grew up in the 90s that look at those games and go, that's what I grew up on. So they're making that sweet spot of different, but just different enough to introduce something that looks new and feels new, and it's still really approachable to families and younger children, and things like that, and it could sell toys, and you know what I mean. Whereas it also has that sweet spot of not changing so much that it alienates its fan base. That's why I think Activision fucked up with, as a sidebar, with Skylanders. They went a little too course corrected and they kind of screwed themselves a little bit. It was only for families, which granted sold well, but as people can tell, most of the actual fans of Spyro that grew up kind of were like, okay, don't care. Which is why Spyro was dead for quite a while, which is a shame, but hey, he's back, which is exciting. Same thing with Crash Bandicoot. And I look at this kind of stuff, and it makes me extremely excited because, to put in perspective, in the last 2 to 3 years, we have gotten a Crash Bandicoot announcement / release of top to bottom rebuilt trilogy of some of the greatest platformers from the PlayStation 1. And we're getting it again with Spyro. So we're getting 2 trilogies of some of the strongest first-party platformer action titles from the PlayStation 1 era with Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. And they look fantastic. And they're going to Crash played fine. The second one, the third one aged really well. Even to this day, they still play well. Crash 1 was always the one that kind of was murky. And even then, Crash 2 had its moments where it's like, ugh. This had a couple levels where I was like, yeah, did not age as well as it. But only a couple. Crash 1's really the only one that had the biggest issues, especially the infamous level. I forget the name of it right now, but it's the clouded with the bridge where you have to use the turtles basically to jump across, and how. Ooh! I remember the original, and I'm going to speak for the remake for that. The remake actually feels like it made it easier. Maybe it's because I grew up, so I got better at it, but it feels like it was a little easier than the original. Because I remember the original on the PS1 was a pain in the fucking ass. But it's cool to see these games come back because I think they address, to a small degree, some of the limitations, some of the problems potentially with the original games, right? And that's a really cool way of doing things, and that's a really smart way of doing things, because it's cool for them to go in and go, okay, we're going to update things, and that's what you expect. You expect the game to look better and to play a little better and things like that. Same thing with Shadow of the Colossus in the background. You expect it to look better and to have it feel more modern. But what I really like is when they start adding in additional stuff. So, like, With Shadow of the Colossus, that's a good example of a game that added the coins, which ultimately didn't add a ton. I really wish it added at least a ability to get a key somewhere so that you could see the rejected design work in actual like 3D models of the rejected colossi that were not made. That would have been cool. But then again, that basically at that point fans would have been like, okay, so you're like halfway there. Why didn't you do it, right? Which I still hold firm hope that the remnants of Team Eco, the former leftovers over at Studio Japan of that team will do a Shadow of the Colossus sequel. I still, in my heart of hearts, hope that happens, but it's doubtful by hope. I hope against hope. And maybe not even like a direct sequel, but a spiritual successor in some way where it's the same general concept. But anyway. But I mean, Shadow of the Colossus remake, it added a lot of other things too. It added more than just cosmetics and things like that. It improved the controls, but also kept so much of it grounded. Same thing Crash Bandicoot. Same thing I'm assuming with Spyro. Spyro is probably going to change some very subtle and some important things, but its main structure is going to be the same, and that's smart. So that's the one side of the argument. Games that were beloved and very well loved and respected and things like that that are just being completely facelifted basically with a lot of great touch-ups and basically rebuilt. We're seeing a lot of those. We're seeing that even on the flip side where it's almost like money grabs with Call of Duty doing it with Modern Warfare and assuming Modern Warfare 2. It seems like they're just doing it for cash grabs, which I know some people might be like, oh, you're being harsh, you're being mean. Well, to me, it seems like a little bit of a cash grab, especially how they treat Modern Warfare. But I have my own opinion. You're more than welcome to disagree with it. That's fine. It's just, to me, it just seemed a little slimy. But that said, I'd be hard pressed to turn down a Black Ops 1 complete rebuilt game, like like a Black Ops at 4K 60 frames. Ooh, HDR lighting. I would probably buy that for $40. I'd be willing to throw 40 at that. And so I mean I guess I'm a little biased, but anyway. So certain ones are cash grab though. Secret of Mana comes to mind too. That was quote unquote a rebuilt, remade game. However, everything I saw of it, the art design was lackluster to be honest. The touch-ups and the work they did just didn't seem all that inspired, and overall it seems like they made a lot of breakable mistakes that for a lot of the fans that bought it and played it at launch have a lot of problems with, and so it ruined a lot of features for some people. Now granted, I'm speaking very ancillary. I'm going based off of basically word of mouth. I personally haven't played it, so I will attest that you could call me out and say you don't know what you're talking about. I own it. Well, yeah, you're right. And you might have a different experience than a lot of the other people I've seen talk about the game. And again, that's fine. But I just wanted to highlight examples of when it kind of goes bad too. When games come back and get remade and basically don't treat the remake as well as they could. They don't take the initiative to really flesh themselves out. And the Master Chief Collection comes to mind, where that had such a bungled launch. And granted, big respect to the people that remade it, and 343 going back recently to fix everything. Kudos to them. I have a lot of respect for that. That's pretty cool. But still, it doesn't forget the fact that it is another example of games that just had maybe a cool idea and maybe the right idea that really could have been a great move, and it just wasn't executed in the right way to really be not successful or like right to the fans, but more just that middle ground, kind of like Crash Bandicoot and kind of like Spyro, in a sense, where they're complete remakes, but that's all they are. They're top to bottom rebuilt games essentially, using familiar assets. But that's what the fans want. And maybe I'm overestimating the Call of Duty fans and fans like that I don't know. I'm getting on a tangent, so I'm going to return to the main crux of what I'm driving at here. So, I've given examples to this point already of games like, I'm going to move my mic away from my, there we go, of, basically just remakes. And, built ground up, good and bad of it, and, whatever. What I find most interesting is we also are experiencing essentially reboot periods too. And granted, we've had that in the past. We've had plenty of reboots and reimaginings, things like that throughout, gaming culture and whatnot. In a lot of ways, you can make an argument for some games being reimaginings and whatnot, but we're hitting a period of time where we're starting to see these games that have taken a nice little nap come back in a strong way and come back in some really cool ways. The number one example is one I've already highlighted, Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider took some time off, and basically in the period of time that it's been gone, I want to say, if I remember my history right, Uncharted 1 and 2 were already out, and Uncharted 3 was out the same year as Tomb Raider? I want to say. Yeah, I think it was at the same year as Tomb Raider. And 2013, if I remember correctly. And sadly, my computer died, so I can't check. But nevertheless, Tomb Raider obviously took a lot of inspiration from Uncharted, and granted, Uncharted inspired by Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider itself as well. But it's cool to see how when Tomb Raider came back, completely rebooted and rebuilt and reimagined in such a vastly big way, it essentially had a whole new idea for itself, a whole new identity. It was more focused on the action adventure side of things than the treasure hunting side. And it was a lot more focused on a narrative focus than previous Tomb Raiders. Like, it was far more concise and far more intricate, and I loved that. And it brought in crafting, and it brought in so many mechanics that were just awesome. And then Rise of the Tomb Raider, I know some people I've seen like to dog it for some reason for it being kind of a shallow Indiana Jones. Like it flirted with the idea of being more Tomb Raider-ish, but it didn't really go all the way with it. And to me, I was okay with it. Rise of the Tomb Raider was a lot of fun. Yes, it could have done more with the treasure hunting aspect itself, but you know what? That's okay. I'm hopeful that Shadow of the Tomb Raider will be kind of even more in depth, and we're gonna start getting more macabre with it, like a lot darker. Because from that teaser trailer, it seems like we're gonna potentially be dealing with some Mayan ruins shit, and that seems exciting. Um, and so that intrigues me in a lot of ways. But this highlights how a reboot can completely change a character. Lara Croft for a long time was a sex symbol that was also kind of a badass, and that's easily, with the pixel pointy triangle boobs, right? And the same could be said, that she's also affiliated with Angelina Jolie, being a feisty and a very sensual and sexual embodiment of a woman. And a lot of it was almost like a male fantasy in some ways, but also kind of, to a small degree, a female empowered figure. But I'll always say that the original design of Tomb Raider was more towards the male demographic than appealing to the female demographic, just because of the way she was designed and everything like that. Which, granted, probably sounds like some bad talk, and I'll defend why I say that now. Back then, that's just kind of, I want to say how it was directed, because if you look at now, Laura, they changed so much about her. They made her a lot more fierce of a warrior, and they haven't really sexualized her nearly as much. They haven't done, obviously, the classic bust ties. They made her a lot more violent. They made her a lot more emotional, which was a big one. I remember the first time you played Tomb Raider, the first person you kill, she gets sick and very, she gets PTSD pretty much right off the bat, but she gets desensitized all through the rest of the game to the violence and the death and everything. So I see that, right? And that to me speaks to a much bigger, stronger woman figure than the 90s Tomb Raider. Um, and that's why I love the modern Tomb Raider so much. She really became more than just what the preconceived notions of being a sex symbol what used to be. She really broke out and became a feminist icon in some ways. And same thing with Aloy. She helped kickstart basically the new revolution for characters like Aloy to exist, for characters like, I think in some ways, what Kara will be like in Detroit, um, and characters like that. And that's really exciting. We need to have more empowered characters like that, especially with the women's side of things. Nadine Ross and Chloe, I think, really got elevated because of Tomb Raider, the reboot. And that really helped inspire, in some degree, how they were affected in their solo story with Lost Legacy. Granted, Chloe was well written from the get-go anyway in Uncharted 2 and 3, even though she was a minor character in 3, but nevertheless, how she transitioned to 4 with in the Lost Legacy, night and day. Like she's such a cool fucking character. And to me, that just she and Nadine Ross even rose the bar even higher with their story, with their progression, with how they dealt issues than Lara Croft, which is going to make Shadow of the Tomb Raider so much more interesting to me when it tries to raise that bar in terms of storytelling and character development and yada yada yada. And so I look at Tomb Raider as what in the modern period of time, from pretty much the mid to late PS3 era slash the very early start of the PS4 all the way to now. And Tomb Raider is probably the biggest example of like a reboot that pretty much fundamentally changed at its core so much of itself to reinvent itself. However, big comma to that, Wolfenstein will be another one. Wolfenstein fundamentally changed so much of its core strengths for the better. It focused a lot more on narrative. It focused a lot more on just the visceralness and the evilness. And granted, I liked Wolfenstein 2. I think Wolfenstein 2 went a little too far into the malicious hardness of the game. Like I feel like they could have reined it back a little bit. Still really liked it. Had some really cool ideas. It definitely felt like it started to peter out the last hour or so, though, but nevertheless, still liked it. And I love the reimagined reboot, and also kind of continuation of this new Wolfenstein series. Same thing with Doom. Doom, in a lot of ways, was a reimagining and like almost a reboot itself of Doom while still being true to itself. And Doom was the shit. It is so fucking good. And Deus Ex, with its kind of reimagining, refocus slash prequel reboot-ish sort of dealio, it also does a lot of great things. I like Mankind Divided a lot, even though I thought it was actually a lot shorter than I expected. It still was a lot of fun. I could keep listing things, but what you probably are all waiting for me to talk about here is the biggest reboot for the PlayStation, which would be, naturally, God of War. God of War is right around the corner for me. We are from April 5th, 15 days from it releasing. And I can't tell you how excited I am, for one thing. But two, God of War, the reboot, is just that. It took a big page, I think, from Tomb Raider, where it looked at itself and basically asked the question, how can I stay relevant, and how can I tell a meaningful story? Like, how am I going to be meaningful in this new world of gaming? That's an honest question. That's a hard question to ask. Because in gaming, you have waves. We even saw it with God of War. God of War 1 and 2 and 3, along with Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus. Chains of Olympus, I think, to a smaller extent. Ghost of Sparta was pretty damn well received. But all three of the major titles were very, very well received. Like low 90s from Metacritic, I want to say. Like I think 90 or maybe 89 for God of War 1, 92 or 93 for God of War 2, and then probably about 91 for God of War 3, with Ghost of Sparta being probably 88, 89, and Chains of Olympus 86, 85. Well, maybe a little higher than that, 87, 86. You have all those, but the series kept going. You know, it had the mobile game, Ghost of God of War Betrayal. It had, you know, oh goodness, oh my god, I'm blanking on what the other one would be. I think it's just it's just Betrayal. For some reason, I thought there's another one for like the Vita, but they ended up doing God of War Ascension, and God of War Ascension by that point in time when it released, with sadly Stig Asmussen basically sadly being given the reins to a franchise that was kind of petering out. It was 6 games deep already by that point, right? So he was given a franchise that was already kind of feeling its age a little bit. So God of War Ascension got like 85 or 84, which not bad, but it didn't sell amazing. It sold meh, and critically it did subpar compared to its predecessors. And that was pretty much the last God of War for a long time, because I think Sayamaka obviously knew they had to put it on rest and give it a break, give it a breather, like every franchise. That's what they're doing with Naughty Dog over with Uncharted. I doubt they'll touch Uncharted for a while, unless they do these side stories. Like they give like a small team to work on these side stories of like, hey, let's do a Sam. You know, who's got, you know, do you guys have a story for Sam and Sully? Cool. Let's see what you can do and make it into like an 8 to 10 hour game. You know, take some time. You know, we'll do another $40 game, and it'll be affiliated, you know, as a branch off story, kind of like what Last Legacy was. Go do your thing. With Santa Monica, they had to take a big step back though, because unlike Uncharted, Uncharted only got better and better, and Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy were amazing high points to end or take a timeout at. Ascension was debatably the low point for the franchise, and it also sold the worst, if I remember correctly, or at least it hovered in that ballpark. And that meant Sayamaka taking a pause was more of a defeated pause. And I think, to be honest, not to dog on Sayamaka, I love Sayamaka. I think they've done amazing work. It was needed. It was necessary. And it was basically kind of the beginning to something new. It was the beginning to a necessary change. Now you might be wondering, what's that change? Well, let's dig into what Sayamaka was doing before God of War. God of War was not their first project coming back. Sayamaka was obviously involved and has always been involved with a lot of different projects. They've helped the creators over at Journey, make Journey. They've helped make Ian Finch. They've helped make Bound with Plastic. Sayamaka is one of the biggest hubs for co-developed projects with Sony to make non-first party indies, is the way I could put it. Like they're the team that kind of partners up with that game company. Like they're the ones that did Flower, Flow, and Journey in collection and in connectivity with Sayamaka, with Sayamaka. Sayamaka and that game company work together on those games. Giant Sparrow, same thing with Unfinished Swan and with Ian Finch, and so on and so forth. But Sayamaka had a very big project in the works for quite a while. And I'm going to save talking too much about that project for another episode. I want to dig more into Sayamaka and its history and kind of how they became to be where they are now, along with some of the staff, because Sayamaka Studios is one of my favorite video game studios ever. Like, I love and have loved so many people that have passed and come through that studio, much like Naughty Dog. But basically, they had a big project that fell through. A very big project. It was like 100 to 150 person team working on this game, maybe even more. It might have been up to 200, and the project came through. Now, keep in mind, most game studios that size of like Santa or Naughty Dog, a 200 to 250 or even 300 person team is a major AAA game team. Like that is almost typical for a massive skill game. And this game was, I think, a year into development. And again, I'm going to get more into specifics when I do the specific video on the project and whatnot. But more or less, when the project fell through, it kind of shook the core of Santa Monica. And I'm going to almost equate him to either one of two metaphors. Uh, the knight in shining armor riding up on his horse to save the day, or or, or the tyrant to take over and fucking just rule things with iron fist. Because I love Corey Balrog, but he even admits, he's like, I get so into the weeds and so crazy about my shit that I can't help but become super possessive and like obsessed with what I'm doing. And that's what I love about him. The dude has a crazy work ethic. And so, with all that in mind, Corey Balrog came back to the team, and I think he, in the most recent interview I heard of him with Kinda Funny, talking to Greg Miller, he said he got back in 2013, and he had worked on the game for about a year and a half, just like toying around with the idea. Obviously they toyed around with Norse mythology and also Egypt, and basically he became such a big standard bearer for God of War. I'm going to do a quick throwback now. I had recently played God of War 1 again, and I had to do the speed run because my goal this month, before God of War comes out, is to platinum, and I've beaten every God of War I can. Now, I have God of War 1 done now, officially. God of War 2 is done. Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta are done. So I have God of War 3 left, which I'm doing on the PS4, so I'm doing the remastered one. I could technically add God of War 3 on the PS3 as well, if I have the time. We'll see. And Ascension. I'm going to focus on those two first, and then I'll work my way back. But anyway, I was watching developer commentary about the making of God of War. It was a crazy throwback seeing, early 2000s, David Jaffe, who's the game director of that, who is also the game director for Twisted Metal and for a lot of great games, and Shan Studstill and Stig Asmussen and and for freaking Corey Balrog, who they all looked so damn young, and it was amazing. But all the passion they were talking about, just the risks they were taking, and like the passion they had for this was something crazy and out of the box. This was something no one really thought to do. This was something no one was like. Sony was a little skeptical, and Corey Balrog even admits when the game got released, he never thought there was going to be a sequel. He was like, "Oh, you guys are greenlighting a sequel," and then he became the director for the sequel. But it's crazy looking back and thinking how he's feeling now about God of War and what he felt with the new God of War coming out is exactly how everyone felt about the original. And I love that mirrored parallel universe feeling. And I love seeing that because if there's one thing I'll give credit to is passion. When a video game is made with a passionate studio and a passionate team, you're gonna get a pretty fucking amazing result. Like I truly believe in that. We saw that with Tomb Raider from Crystal Dynamics. Like that team was very passionate about that shit. We saw that with Bluepoint. They were super passionate with Shadow of the Colossus. Like they took that stuff to heart and they really want to do right by it. And we continue to see it over and over again. And we also see the opposite, where again money grabs and cash grabs and all that. But I mean, you take the goods with the bad. It is what it is. But I look at Studio Samaka, and God of War is the testament, much like Tomb Raider was not too long ago, and games like this, that they're more than just a reboot. They're a weird blend, and they're more or less a reimagining, which is, yeah, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, that's what it's called. Hell, even God of War's first trailer in 2016, they said it's a new beginning. True. And I guess my point is, this game was just such a structurally rebuilt and just restructured and changed product to the point where you compare that to the original God of War, and it's just night and day. However, at its core, you have a leadership and a team that's just as passionate, if not more passionate, on this title as it was on the original. And that's just, I love seeing that. It's kind of like watching good baseball teams or football teams or any teams like that. When you have that passion, just that connected tissue, everyone's on board and all in, and just they want to do well and they want to succeed and they want to kick ass. You're gonna get good vibes from that and just continue to reap the rewards from that. And I love seeing that shit. And I think to me, God of War is going to be such an amazing fucking game. I truly believe that. And it's going to be a testament of how to do a great quote-unquote reboot, quote-unquote reimagining. Much like Insomniac when they did Ratchet & Clank. That was a phenomenal reimagining reboot of sorts. It's a lot of great shit. The last game I want to talk about real quick before I end this long-ass video and episode talking about remakes, remasters, and all that happy shit is I want to make a reference to Shadows Die Twice, which is From Software's teased video game that they teased at PSX, or was that Game Awards? It was sometime last year. And a lot of people initially were like, oh, it's a Bloodborne sequel. Well, I'm leaning more towards a lot of other people that have been saying the opposite. Just because of the way, the conversation's been going, but also the way it looks and yada yada. A QAnon sequel or spiritual successor, which most of you probably don't know what the fuck that is. KUON. QAnon is a survival horror title that was only released in Japan. More or less, it's a weird fucking game. It's basically about exorcisms and a man that kind of goes crazy that wants to build a cocoon to create the ultimate being. And you're trying to basically be part of the team to stop it, and so on. Great. That's a super simplified analysis of a game that I know just enough about to talk about. I've seen enough to talk about, but I couldn't really do more than that, and I apologize for the people that are like, QAnon's the shit, how do you not know? Well, my bad. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it seems like From Software is doing either a complete reboot or a reimagining, revisit, restructuring of what QAnon was. Because QAnon was not financially successful. It sold very meagerly, with it only being in Japan, and it reviewed very meh. It was like in the 50s. So it's a very big cult classic that not many people know much about. And so to see From Software potentially do something like this, I wanted to bring that up because much like God of War, much like Tomb Raider with Crystal Dynamics, it's a big risk. You run the risk of doing something like this, bringing back a thing to a fan base that might feel really strongly about it. But also, From Software is the flip side of it, where they're bringing back a game that no one's really fucking heard of or knows much about, for the most part. And they're trying to reintroduce this game to an audience that knows them for the Souls series and expects Souls games. Whether they announce it or not that they're not working on Souls games for a while, their fan base is going to think, oh, this game that doesn't say Bloodborne 2 is probably Bloodborne 2, and they're just trying to throw us off. So it's going to be really intriguing how From Software reimagines and reboots and just redoes their catalog and just kind of reinvents themselves as more than just the Dark Souls creators. Because they used to be the Armored Core creators. So it's going to be really cool to see what they do with this IP and what exactly their plans are. So hopefully we see more E3. So I'm wrapping it up now. Really long rant, really long talk. Where are we at? Half an hour, almost 40 minutes. Yeah, we're at 40 minutes. Again, got a big thanks to Casey over at Cosmic Game Club and Javi and being amazing. And check out the Cosmic Game Club, or check out check out Drink, Respawn, Repeat. We make some fun stuff. Please check out. You might enjoy it. And if you don't, well, leave a comment and say why. It could be the audio quality, and I apologize for that. Right now we're using headsets or using laptop microphones. So my plan is once we get more money, once I get a better paying job, to invest into some of those Blue Yeti microphones to make some real nice, silky smooth audio. That's my plan. And at some point we'll actually video record these, and it'll be a good time. But this is all work in progress. We're slowly building up to where we want to go. And I really appreciate anyone ever wants to watch this and listen to me ramble and talk about stuff I'm really passionate about and that I really like talking about. So again, thank you to each and every one of you. I can't wait to build a community with everybody and to see where things go. This was XOXO to PlayStation Episode 1, talking about remasters, remakes, re-envisionings, and all that happy shit. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and you have a fantastic rest of your day and your week. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Later.